The story of the champion, the alligator dog. I get questions all the time about the alligator dog, his family, and his descendants. I have the impression that the more they talk about alligator, the less they know about it. Everything related to alligator is unforgettable, and I will gladly tell his story. A gentleman named Williams, from Fort Worth, got a bitch from the breeder Maurice Carver. He named her Satin Lady. She was a big bitch, she was black and beautiful. He cared more about her than anyone else. It came from the same breeding, which Maurice was always famous for making. Unlike most of Carver's dogs, Satin Lady did not fight. The Niger dog was one of the last dogs created by Earl Tudor. He passed through several kennels before coming the king, and the crossing happened. As the puppies grew, I had the opportunity to work with all three bulldogs. Alligator, despite its greatness, had two littermates, who, in my opinion, were as good as it was. One of them was a male named Soko, and the other one was a female named Renee. All three were real bulldogs in every way. Soko, even at a young age, seemed so good to the Dogmans that they went to buy his brother, Alligator. When the Dogmans, they bought the Alligator. I was sure that they bought an albatross, because he was so big, that I didn't even imagine the chances of that dog being as good as Soko. If Soko were compared by size to Alligator, he would be nothing. You need to understand that all this happened in the age of dogs, really big ones. No one was expecting anything special from any dog. The Dogmans had good reason to pay a decent sum for the alligator dog. Also, the Dogmans had a very large reserve of dogs, and that they could compete with any of them at a high level. The Plumbers trained dogs much better than most people and were always looking for action with their dogs. They realized that they could not afford the luxury of a methodical learning process. They were great dogmans, and the dogs were treated harshly. They didn't pay attention to the dogs, who didn't have enough qualities or skills to stand out in what was proposed for them to do. The school of Alligator started with good dogs, but they were all smaller than him. Most of them were simply dominated by this optical illusion. In his history, there were several fights. When the Alligator ran from its opponents, it had the Dogmans worried. Because they've never seen the Alligator get really tired, even after fighting several times against two opponents in a row. They bought a dog from me named Zeke, who was a wrecker, but he was also a bulldog, very playful. A man once decided that the Alligator had not impressed him, and decided to bet that Zeke would simply defeat the Alligator. The Plumbers were always ready to show off the sport they played. They accepted the bet, and the fight was held. That man clearly underestimated the Alligator, and he paid for it in cash. He had Zeke defeated, who was far from a match for Alligator. As soon as the visitor left, Plumber made a statement, absolutely true in the bulldog world. You cannot judge a dog's working qualities by its appearance. In other words, you can't bet on a dog just because he's cuter than his opponent. In pursuit of perfection, the Dogmans organized a fight with Trussell's Dum Dum to see if Alligator was really a dog of gameness. The fact is that Dum Dum was a very fighting dog, although he was bigger than the Alligator. That day, everyone seemed to suspect that any tough dog could be suspected of being a mongrel. And the Dogmans, they did everything they could to convince everyone otherwise, to try and stop him. Before starting the fight, they ran the Alligator around the track for half an hour, then walked for 15 minutes to cool down. After all that, they took him to the ring, where he stayed for half an hour, fighting Dum Dum. It's hard to believe, but Alligator fought like crazy, even though he had to somehow drag his feet. This match turned out to be a huge test of gameness, for Dum Dum as well. The next Alligator game took place at one of the great shows, by Maurice Carver, where 10 couples participated. Alligator fought against Santan, who was chosen in advance, specifically to defeat Alligator. The owner of Santan was called Bryant. Both dogs, in excellent condition, started the fight at a fast pace. The Alligator went to bite Santan's feet, and from time to time going to bite in the mouth. At 26 minutes, Santan turns the fight. At 30 minutes, he doesn't bite. A scratch is called. Santan is back in the fight. At 40 minutes, the Alligator flies at Santan like a black demon, taking him to the corner of the ring. The Santan biting the front leg of the Alligator. At 45 minutes into the scratch, Santan heard the judges count and didn't return to the fight. The Alligator is declared the winner. Immediately after this fight, there was a lot of talking among the spectators who were present. Everyone thought that this dog would easily deal with this black demon. Alligator's next fight was against a dog named Jack. The Alligator weighed 27 kilos, and the Jack was 4 kilos heavier. Two heavyweights came together, and the fight began. Jack took down Alligator, and worked on him for 20 minutes. The Alligator fighting to the end. Jack, before the match with Alligator, was an experienced fighter, but he never had to face an equal opponent. Gradually, Alligator reacts, tying the fight score at 30 minutes. After a while, he slowly started to dominate Jack, who had already done his best, and started to get tired. It didn't take long for dismay to show in Jack's eyes. In the first half of the fight, Babi said that this could be his last Alligator fight. Jimmy Job turned and said, "Alligator was beaten by Jack. If he keeps the advantage, it will be the end of Alligator." When the fight was halfway through, Babi said, "Looks like this fight is in Alligator's pocket." An hour later, Jack heard the judges count, and did not return to the fight. I went to the other side of the ring to help Jack. I have found that the Alligator under the dog is no worse than the Alligator over the dog. Jack's chest and belly looked like they'd been through a meat grinder. And I realized that this fight, it wasn't easy for him, it was a punishment sent to him by Alligator. I saw it with my own eyes. After that fight, until the end of his days, Jack lived in luxury. This fight discouraged many from challenging Alligator, and did so for a long time. Once, at Plumber Kennel, Kettle was with some young dogs. One of those male dogs was named Jeff. He was a big, piebald dog. He was too big for the kennels, except for one, the Alligator. So Alligator was released to test Jeff. Jeff turned out to be almost equal to Alligator, which hasn't happened in Alligator's entire career. The fight didn't last long, because the Alligator started to bleed. After that roll, Jeff headed to the Midwest, where I hear he became a champion. When the Dogmans were almost done fighting, a message came from Oklahoma that a man named Brown, his dog, called Coringa, they were summoning Alligator. Before that, several contracts were canceled, but this match took place. They brought with them a stick, for the Dogmans quick. And I must admit, they did their homework perfectly, throwing a very talented fighter into the ring, and not a simple grunt. A fighter who could beat a lot of people, but not Alligator. The dogs were trained by the best pit fighters of the time. Alligator was prepared by Dennis Burton himself, and Coringa, by Randy Fox. The ring joined two 50-pound males, judged in Oklahoma Shorty. The dogs met in the middle of the ring, and the alligator went to the bottom. The Joker defended with great skill, and for a while, it seemed that his fighting style paralyzed the alligator. The alligator's devastating attack, which had brought him victories over everyone he encountered in his path, now seemed ineffective. Also, all of his former opponents, working on defense, weren't as smart and talented as the Joker. And still, at 25 minutes, Coringa turns, but doesn't manage to catch him until 52 minutes into the fight. Joker was the first to make a difficult scratch. Finally, the fight had already passed an hour. The alligator, breaking through the Joker's defense, and demonstrating his predatory instincts, finished at the hour and 9-minute mark. The alligator, with an animal scream, threw the Joker into the corner of the ring, and ended this beautiful fight. The alligator was known for his comeback to fight, and for that wild roar, which he made in the corner, above all. He impressed everyone with his amazing instincts, assassins. A few minutes, watching him, and you already clearly saw how he ended the fight. At 1 hour and 12 minutes, Coringa heard the judges count in the corner, and did not return to the fight. We saw two dogs, the best heavyweights ever. The dogmans ordered Fox and Brown to bring their dog, Alligator, to the best possible condition. The dogman also announced that the old Alligator is retiring, as he was now officially a champion. Looking back, the only heavyweights I can think of that have ever been in the Alligator League are Hooten's dog, Championship Butcher Boy, and Sampson, Alligator's half-brother. A bitch from Tennessee impressed me with her great competition ability. But she couldn't make me change my mind either. The alligator has always been the best. In addition to being a great fighter, the alligator was a very kind and friendly dog. He was a clown, in his own way. Despite the fact that he bred, with few females, the alligator, with every litter he produced, had a high percentage of excellent dogs. In fact, this story goes much deeper than just a story about a champion named Alligator. I want to inform all those who don't know, that in addition to the fact that Alligator is a champion, he was also a father, and not just to a few good or beautiful dogs. But he became the family, of families, of the highest quality. Stable, time-tested bloodline dogs. The Alligator line. And this great alligator family, from generation to generation, proves its superiority, at the highest level of dog fighting, from all continents of the world. The alligator dogs have contributed to the creation and development of many modern and high-quality lines. I've never been sentimental with my dogs, but I've had a few that were made just for me. And those were from the lineage of alligators. From everything I've said about the alligator line, I think the most important thing to consider is that this line has a very important feature. Alligator dogs are a perfect match for almost any other bloodline. Saturating the other blood, with their unique fighting skills and characteristics. I truly believe that alligator dogs are capable of adding value to any breeding program.
My name is Rodolpho Luiz, and I will leave the story of Earl Tudor.